Hello guys, I hope you are doing great. In this video, I'm going to lead you through the puzzle game I made using the line web components framework, and I will try my best to explain to you how I made it. I hope you enjoy that video. Let's go. Okay, here we are on the puzzle game, Lightning component tab that we created to embed our game. Let's have a look into it. Moving to the setup. Moving to the setup. Okay, just wait. Tabs. Okay, here you can see on the Lightning component tabs, you can see our puzzle game Lightning component tab. Let's click, let us click on it. Okay, as you can see, that Lightning component tab is related to Lightning web component name LWC Fun Puzzle Game. That is our base Lightning web component. We will have a look into it later. So let us go back on this screen. Okay, let's click on the button start to start a game part. Here you have the counter, and here you have the puzzle grid. Let us wait till the counter get to 0. Okay, as you can see, we have failed since the counter reached 0, the value 0, and that the puzzle grid was not yet object. Let's try to replay. Okay, let's arrange it. 7, 8. Okay, and as you can see, we have 1. Since the counter is not yet at 0, and that the puzzle grid is already object. Okay, that is all about that game. Okay, now we are about moving into the code. I'll try to explain you how I developed the different features you have seen to that game. Okay, here we are on into my VS Code development environment. I like to use it. Into the LWC folder, you can see that we have three components. Those are the three components we created for our game. Okay, the main one is the LWC Fun puzzle game. That is our base component. It is the one that is directly related to our our Lightning component tab. Okay, let's get into it. Let's open the JavaScript controller. Okay, here you can see that we have one attribute playing screen displayed. When that attribute is to false, we display the start screen where we have the start button, and when it is true, we display the game the game screen where we have the counter and the puzzle grid. Okay, we have a second get attribute logo URL. That is the attribute that returns the reference to our logo, the the web component, the LWC fun logo. Okay, as you can see, we import it from a static resource that we created before. Okay, and then we have the onStart method. OnStart method is executed once the user has clicked on the start button. And once he clicks on the start button, we put the plain screen display attribute to true, so that the game screen will be displayed with the counter and the puzzle grid. Okay, let's move into the template, the HTML file. As you can see here, we display the logo. Okay, and here we have the start button. And once a user click on it, we execute the on start method that we saw before. Okay, and then we have the section that is displayed only if playing screen the attribute, the playing screen displayed attribute is to true. Those other sections are displayed when the playing screen displayed attribute is to false. Okay, and this is the only one that is displayed or once the playing when the playing screen display attribute is to true. Okay, you can see that we are calling the LWC fun puzzle table component. Let's move into that component. Here we are into the JavaScript controller of the LWC fun puzzle table Lightning Web component. As you can see, we have three attributes, four attributes. I wanted to say. The first one has failed. That attribute is true when the player has failed. Has won is true when the player has won, and the set interval reference is used to manage the call of the set interval function. You see it. Okay, then we have the puzzle matrix. That is the puzzle matrix we have on the screen. That is a representation of that matrix. We have digit, and where we have the zero, it is zero is placed to mean the empty space. Okay, the empty space. We have the get attribute result pop-up open that will return true when the result pop-up will be open and false when it will be closed. The result pop-up is displayed at the end of the game part. Okay, we have the get puzzle list attribute that transform that matrix into a into a one dimension array, so that it would be easier for us to iterate on it and display it on the screen. Okay, here we have another attribute, seconds counter, that take the value contained in the time constant as we have defined above. We have put 10. 10 is very small, but we put that for testing reasons. Okay. Here we have the connected callback. That method is executed once the component is dropped into the DOM. Okay. Into that callback, we call the init method. Into the init method, as you can see, we reinitialize the counter. Then we call that method that is native in JavaScript, set interval, so that that piece of code will be executed every 1 second. Okay, and let's see what is happening into that callback. Okay, into that callback, we check if the seconds counter is greater than 0. Okay, if it is not yet 0, then we decrement the value of the seconds counter. Okay, then we check if after decrementing the value of the of seconds counter, uh, it gets to 0. That means we have failed, we have lost. So we put the has failed attribute to true and the has won to false, and then we clear the interval for that callback to no longer be called. Okay, we call that to clear the interval. That's why we use that attribute we saw above. Okay, after that we have the On select puzzle pawn. Okay, that method is executed once the player clicks on a pawn on the puzzle. Okay, and once he clicks on the pawn, we retrieve the index of the pawn. Okay, using that instruction. After that, we calculate the index on the row in the matrix. As you can remember, we have transformed the matrix into an 1D array, yes, in order to iterate on it easily. That's the reason why we need to recalculate the row index in the matrix. Index in the matrix using that formula. Then we call the move pawn method in order to move the pawn, if it is possible. Okay, let's get into that method. Here we have the move pawn method that takes two parameters. Uh, I that is the row index, and j that is the column index. As you can see, the first instruction is a copy by value of the puzzle matrix attribute. We make that copy because we don't want to modify directly the puzzle matrix. If you remember well, we have a get attribute here, puzzle list, that generate a one dimension array uh, from the puzzle matrix attribute. Okay. If we modify directly the sub elements of that matrix, that attribute will not notice that this attribute has changed. So that is the reason why we make a copy by value of that, make a copy by value of that attribute into the puzzle matrix variable. Okay, then we have some conditions. If I minus 1 is greater than 0, that means there is a space at the left of the current pawn. If it is the case, we check if that space is empty. And if that space is empty, we move the pawn to the left. Else, if I plus 1 is less or equal to 2, if it is less than 2 or equal to 2, that means there is a space at the left of the current pawn. And then we check if that space is empty. If it is the case, we move the pawn to the right, to the right. Okay. Else, if j minus 1 is greater or is greater than 0 or equal to 0, that means there is a space. There is a space. There is a space above the current pawn. So if that space is empty, we move the pawn to the top. Else, if j plus 1 is less than 2 or equal to 2, that means there is a space below that pawn. And if that space is empty, we move the pawn to the bottom. Okay. After all that, we reassign our puzzle matrix variable to our puzzle matrix attribute, so that the get attribute named puzzle list will notice that the puzzle matrix has changed and recalculate his value, so that the UI will be refreshed, since the puzzle list is used in the HTML on the template. Okay, that is all about the move pawn method. After that, no, that is not all about. Sorry, we have a check that we made after that. We call the check has one method in order to check if User, the player has won. Let's get into that method. To that method, we iterate on the puzzle list, one dimension array, in order to check if it is ordered. If it is ordered, we will reach that those instructions, clear the interval to avoid the re-execution of that callback. Then we will return true. And if it is not ordered, we will return false inside the loop. Yes, that's all about the check has won. So that if the user has won, if it is ordered, the has won attribute will be passed to true, and the result pop-up will be opened. Okay. Then we have the onReplay method. The onReplay method is called when the user will click on the replay button that is on the result pop-up. You will see it later. Into that method, once the user clicks on the replay method, on the replay button, I wanted to say, we pass the has failed to false, has won to false, has initially. Then we initialize also the puzzle matrix with those values, and then we call the init method. The init method is the one we saw above. This one that will initialize the second counter. Then we call that set interval for that callback to be executed each 1 second. Okay, so let's move into the HTML of that component. Okay, here we are into the HTML. We have the first section. Once the result pop-up is to true, let's move back. Here, result, okay, open, result pop-up open. The result pop-up is open if if we have failed or if we have won. So once it is true, we'll call the line component that displays the pop-up. We'll get into that later. Okay, let's see first. Let's have a look on the other part. Here we have the counter and the second counter attribute that is called here. The UI is refresh each 1 second when the counter is decreased. Okay. This is the other part. That part is the one that represents the puzzle grade. As you can see, we iterate on the puzzle list method, calculated the attribute I wanted to say. We iterate on it in order to display the pound or the empty space. As you can see, if puzzle pound num is true, it is true when the puzzle pound is a number greater different from zero. If it's a number that is not zero, we'll use that class in order to display a pound. We manage it into the CSS. Okay. We display a pound and the number associated to the pound. Okay. And if it is false, that means the puzzle pound number is zero. We should display an empty space. That is the reason why we have nothing inside. And as you can see, we have the class puzzle empty case. Yes, that is also managed on the CSS. You could have a look into the CSS, but it's not the most important now. Okay, we have seen almost everything into the component LWC fun puzzle table. Then we move into the LWC fun game result pop-up method component, I wanted to say. Okay, let's move into that. The GS. Okay, into the GS we have two attributes. The two attributes are API attributes, so that the values of those attributes are passed by the parent component. As you can see here, we pass those two values, has failed or has won, so that into the component game result pop-up we will know if the player has failed or if he has won. Okay, let's move back. Okay, here. Then we have the onReplay method. That onReplay method is executed once the user clicks on the button replay here. It's on the UI. Once he clicks, we execute the onReplay method. It's this one. Okay, the onReplay. It's this one. Okay, once the user clicks on the replay button, we execute that method, the onReplay method, and we dispatch an event into the DOM. That event is named replay. And if you go into the parent component of the pop-up component, that is the result table, you can see that we listen to that event on replay. And once we listen to that event, we call the on replay method that we saw before. That one, that on replay method that will initialize the game. Okay. And if you go back on the result pop-up, you can see that once the has one attribute is to true, we display youth one, and one it is once has failed it is true, we display you failed. Okay, so that the user will have a message according to his result. Okay, we have come to the end of our video. I led you through the key elements of what I did to make that game work using the line web component. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and put a thumbs up. See you soon.